So, this week at the start of December, there was a game update, largely to do with balance, but some other changes in there too. Now, long-term viewers of the channel are hopefully familiar with the fact that whenever balance comes out, I cover it co-commentary style. We do like podcasts, basically, with Boots. So there is a separate video on that. Both of them are going up today, and you guys can check out if you like. That means for this production, in which I want to go over all the other elements of the patch, there's really not much to say. In fact, I'm kind of scared of boring you all to tears here. It's a housekeeping patch with some vaguely interesting things, but I figured I'd bulk out this production with some other stuff because there has been some interesting news about Guild Wars 2 outside of the release itself, something to do with World vs. World especially I want to talk about. And on top of that, I thought I would let you guys in the loop of what I've actually been doing in game this week, because there's some fairly interesting developments there. Some of the changes that came to the game way back in March I've finally interacted with, and I kind of want to give you a little bit of a review. So let's open up, jump right on in with the changes themselves from December 1st. A general change here was to fix an issue causing objective markers to appear outside of the target map when players were in a different map during some sections of the story. I didn't really notice this, but how often is it while you're playing through this stuff, you stop what you're doing to look at weird areas of the map to then find there's a UI bug? But hey, there you go. They also say, in general, they've added a checkbox to the general options tab of the options panel to disable the compact button in the inventory panel, and they added additional map currencies to the bottom of the inventory panel on many maps. So this second of them has actually been quite nice. I'm not sure if it's new, but I think this is why when I was in Path of Fire this week, I was seeing Elegy Mosaics written down there on that bottom bar. It's funny, looking way back to Vanilla at launch, all we used to see at all, I think, was gold. Then they added Karma, and then keys started getting implemented, and they've gone further with it. It's unfortunate, really, that the patch notes don't illuminate more details, but, you know, it's more quality of life, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear that it's because it's something they're doing with End of Dragons. They got a mind for that too. This other change, though, the checkbox. Remember I described in a recent video how you now have buttons letting you deposit and letting you compact without having to go to the little mini options menu, the cog on the top right of your inventory? Well, it was pretty common to misclick and hit compact. Now, I've done that several times, and usually for me, accidentally hitting compact isn't a big deal, because my inventories usually are a complete shambles and mess, and if anything, it might have cleaned them up a bit. But for some people, this is super aggravating. Imagine, say, in your inventory, you've got all your weapons lined up at the bottom in a precise order, or your consumables at the bottom or something. You've hit compact, and now they've all shuffled. And then how this interacts when you have special bags that are only supposed to hold certain upgrade components or certain depositable crafting materials and stuff like that. It's just irritating. So yeah, there's an option to disable that button. It's very similar to something we saw years ago when they added the option to shuffle, what was it? Shuffle or remove compact and deposit on the mini menu. I remember that like it was yesterday, sparked by a streamer, Aurora Peachy, and I guess that was years and years ago now, but there you have it. That was pretty much it, aside from the balance and gem store stuff. A new Herald of Aurene package, which has, you know, a back piece and an outfit and a mythic weapon if you end up spending something crazy like 2,000 gems. The wiki noted at the same time, though, that if you're using LFG for the new Dragon Response missions, before this patch, it was forming squads, and now it will form parties which work a bit better with the systems that are going on there. Systems that if you've been watching my videos recently, complemented to a great degree, and now I guess that's a bit smoother. They also had late notes following this. They say under general that they changed the chest reward at the end of Dragon Response missions so you can AoE loot it. That wasn't happening before. When the boss of a Dragon Response mission is defeated, everyone gets revived. Now, I don't know why that's happened, mostly because I haven't been dead at the end of one of the missions, but it's not like they kick you out really quick. My guess would be that it ends and now the instance is going to close or something, is going to try and reset, and people will end up missing out on their loot because people didn't revive them. You've got to remember that if you're doing a public Dragon Response mission, you don't have to be in a party to be playing it. Other people might not realize that you're dead, for example, off in a corner somewhere, and then you would end up missing out on your loot after it's done because everybody just zones away. Well, now you will get revived. That's my guess as to why this change has come through. Fixed a bug that caused the wild flame tornadoes, created by the Destroyer of the Great Bridges Burning call skill, to launch players into the stratosphere. So there was a post on Reddit about this, These tornadoes, we see this interaction a lot in the game now. This is one of the things I alluded to in a recent video, where you're playing in Gendaran Fields, you're at the Ascalon settlement, and yet you're participating in a fight with these quite new mechanics, you know, where you're getting launched and you're getting flung around. So these tornadoes are supposed to send you in the air and then you drop back down. They apply a bit of damage, a bit of burning. But there was a specific situation where you could end up getting launched so high into the sky that you got kicked out of the instance. I was actually amazed on that Reddit post to learn that there was like a ceiling to the Dragon response missions, and above that ceiling you would be considered out of bounds. I never would have thought the devs would go to the effort of adding a ceiling like that, but they did. Maybe that's like a game-wide system thing that they did when, say, the Sky Scale or the Griffin got added. I don't know how common this issue was, but the bug's now been fixed. Failing a time limit challenge in the Dragon response missions no longer forces players to exit. Probably a change motivated for similar reasons to the revive thing. You may have failed the mission, but there might be enemies or some kind of loot that you still want to grab before you leave. And then lastly, an interesting change that they call an issue fix, but sounds more like a philosophy thing to me. They say fixed an issue that would cause the strength of bosses in Dragon response missions to scale based on players in the map rather than players in the event area. So to me, it kind of sounds like it makes sense at first glance to do it based on players in the map. But I guess the issue that they're trying to avoid is, let's say we're 3-manning it, and then somebody loads into our instance. Now, he's not right next to us. He's not fighting yet, because he's loaded in really far away. And yet now I have to, you know, fight that extra bit harder because it's scaled up, since he's in the map. He's not fighting, but he's in the map, right? So they don't like that interaction, I suppose. And it makes sense. It reminds me a lot of back when we were working on World First Triple Trouble Worm, and it was one dynamic event, but split across 3 very different areas of Bloodtide Coast. So if a bunch of players left event range in one place, say the boss accidentally went out of bounds or something, suddenly the other bosses completely elsewhere would scale down and then become really easy to kill. And that was very hard for us in the Zergs to figure out why that was happening, and actually threw a lot of runs. It reminds me of that, but maybe not exactly the same. And that's it really, guys. They fixed a service crash, fixed a crash when selecting traits in the hero panel, and that's your release for the start of December here, along with the balance. In theory, I should stop the video now, but I don't like doing videos this short, so let's talk about some other stuff. First of all, kind of a new patch thing, the further iteration on the Dragon response missions is up. Now, if you remember, the idea of these releases were meant to be a little bit more like Season 1, not just in that they were looking at core maps and stuff, and we might not get whole new environments to explore, but actually because they would evolve and update even in between major releases. And we've already seen a little bit of that in the Icebrood Saga with the Bangar conversations, but you know, to a lot of people that's just lore, that's just conversation, that's not content really. Dragon response missions seemed to suggest there'd be something deeper. Well, what it seems to have just translated into is, on the current release, the global meta is now about getting the Ebon Vanguard as allies, and we're mobilizing them. And you've got some additional opportunity to earn rewards by basically playing in the Fields of Ruin. It's not that there's new events in the Fields of Ruin. It's not that they've really added anything new. There's just different incentive, and you'll find a lot of players around there. Now, I don't necessarily need them to add a ton of new stuff. The Fields of Ruin especially is one of those char maps where there's a bunch of weird events using strange UI and fun things that I kind of get a lot of meaning out of, and it's cool to see a map be highly populated. It's kind of that thing like when the daily system is working really well and there's actually a load of people in an area that you don't usually see them, you kind of get some of those vanilla feelings. I mean, hell, in vanilla, when I went through the char maps, they were basically dead because I did them too early. I was kind of ahead of the curve, so to speak. So I do get some enjoyment out of playing with other people, but is it enough, really? And there's another kind of issue. Everyone's level 80 these days, so you throw everyone back in kind of an early level map like the Fields of Ruin, and it can be a bit annoying trying to tag stuff, which is never meant to be the Guild Wars 2 thing, but that's what the event can feel like at times. You may even see some of it in the footage in the background. Honestly, I haven't really interacted with this much, but just as with the original release of Dragon Response missions, people haven't taken too well to it. I'll give you guys further thoughts when I've actually sunk my teeth in over next week. And if you guys give me some good comments down below, pause the video, type out what you think of it, I can even maybe squeeze out a video of the floor as long as I feel like, you know, it'll be entertaining for people to watch. Second, let's talk about World vs. World. People have been paying a lot of attention to ArenaNet hirings recently. A while ago, there was noted post for the Guild Wars 2 game director job. Hopefully, if you remember, our most recent game director was Mike Z, a guy I actually had a lot of hope and faith in because he was always online in game. You knew that he played a lot of Guild Wars 2 and he understood Guild Wars 2 very deeply. He'd been with the studio for years. He was an old GW1 dev, but then during his time, he didn't really talk to the community much. And one day we realized he'd quietly stepped down. Who knows why or what happened there? We haven't had a game director for ages now. And if you remember before him, we basically had the studio head Mike O, who's also now gone. And even while he was in that position, it was kind of like a dual position thing, and it was only meant to be something in the interim. So who knows where we'll be headed through the End of Dragons era. But they are hiring for that, or were, and here's the new one. A senior game designer for World vs. World systems is being looked for. Now, if you caught my video earlier in the week, you might have seen my flub in which I misinterpreted some news on the forums from 2018, thinking it was something about World vs. World alliances, and it wasn't. We haven't heard anything for ages. Presumably, this is a hire looking into that, finally getting some movement there. I have a lot of reasons to care about World vs. World right now, particularly with a new legendary there. I'll talk about more in just a second. But it feels hard to be excited playing a format that's going to have big changes later that presumably will improve it a lot. Here's what the posting is requiring of people, what their duties will be. To design and implement new and exciting content and systems for Guild Wars 2 with a focus on their large-scale competitive PvP, known as World vs. World. To maintain and revise existing game systems. To playtest and iterate on designs in a highly collaborative environment. Communicate with artists, programmers, other members of the design team. Work with UI, UX to help players better understand Guild Wars 2's many systems. Work with analytics to determine strategy for updating old systems or introducing new. Mentor other designers on developing system design skills, and other duties may be assigned. So a lot of words for very little for us on the outside, but you get the gist. Now, I think the internet in general took heart from a post like this, but to me, I was actually a little bit shocked, you know. It seems interesting that quite a crucial, key position is not really filled for World vs. World here, and what this says to me is we're still on a very long delay before we find something really meaningful and great for World vs. World, right? I've seen some foolhardy sentiment that they're holding it off for the expansion. I don't really believe in that. The last time I was really big into World vs. World was right before Path of Fire. If you remember, they didn't wait for POF to drop the territories in and the World vs. World gliding and the diamond chests and all that stuff. It just came when it was ready, and I think that this would be a similar situation too. So who knows what kind of delay we've got, but there you have it. At least it's on the studio's mind. If you believe they didn't care at all anymore, well, maybe that's some good news for you all. I'm going to close out today's video talking a little bit about what I've been up to in-game, because as hopefully you've seen, this year my focus has been on more stuff than just playing Guild Wars 2 all day, every day. And in particular, what that's meant is while I have covered certain updates and changes that they've come in, I hadn't really interacted with them much. So here's what happened last week. I was looking, as I've already mentioned, maybe you heard me talk about it, for something fun to do in the open world, with the open world meta events, which in general I'm kind of bored by. I've been playing a Staff Ellie, but then got aggravated. Nobody gave Fury and nobody gave Quickness and nobody gave anything fun. So then I played a Tempest build that was just there to spam 250 might out on heatsink over and over and over again. Well, that was fun for a time, but what's really captured me is the idea of an open world Zerging meta build for stuff like the Drakar North meta on a Renegade. And the Renegade can spam out 10-man permanent alacrity with heaps of boon duration, and can spam out tons of might. Maybe not as much as the Tempest build, but still a lot, and giving lots of people lots of alacrity seems like it'd be pretty impactful to me. You could even then maybe run Jarlis and spam lots of stability, even though that might not be that relevant, maybe with the fears and stuff of certain bosses, or, you know, maybe resistance, whatever you like. So this was what I became captivated by, became interested in, and what I really wanted to do was get a new set of heavy armor with high concentration. I'm talking 100% concentration in the open world. None of this like fractal min-max where I'm expecting to have a potion on top. I was going for the full 100, even outside of fractals. And so my go-to usually with this is to spend PvP currencies. If you don't know this about me, over the year 2019, I played a ton of PvP. I have 10,000 wins there in the Champion Brawler title, which is one of the rarer titles on my account. And it means that I've got heaps of free currencies I can just turn into Ascended Gear. Whenever I get bitten by the build making bug, that's usually what I just go to, those vendors. So when I went to the vendors and saw a bunch of random new items, it was a bit of a shock to me. See, what I had forgotten almost completely about was the update back in March. Now, we did cover this, where ArenaNet added 2 new legendaries to the game. There is a legendary amulet available now, and there's a second legendary ring available. The amulet from PvP, the ring from World vs. World. And, well, as I just explained, I have tons of currencies. Turns out, getting the amulet, and remember, the amulet's a pretty cool slot. It's worth a lot of stats. It's like the single most potent accessory and so on. Turns out, I could get it very easily. I just had to win something like 90 games and a few tournament rounds. All this is to say, I've really got into the idea of collecting legendaries again this week. Remember, they did announce the legendary armory quite a bit back now, and we've heard absolutely nothing since. I even saw a post on Reddit a few days ago, ostensibly listing out all the biggest, most important forgotten features and underdeveloped features for Guild Wars 2, like themed around an iceberg, and I think even that post had forgotten to talk about the armory. The armory, though, is a really exciting sounding feature to me, and I think the second it's actually in the game, if it comes into the game, my desire to grab as many of these ultimate prestige items will go way up. So why not get a head start on that? And why not get a head start on just getting as many stat selectable slots as possible for End of Dragons? What that would mean is when End of Dragons comes out, if I have all legendary trinkets, I can play with the new stat types real quick, make videos about them, and talk to you guys about the efficacy of them and so on. So now, as I speak into the microphone, I do have the amulet. It was pretty fun. I don't know whether I can really review the acquisition process for the general Guild Wars 2 player, someone who doesn't really care about PvP because they've never had fun in the game type, and they aren't sitting on heaps and heaps of currencies. I think the grind will be a lot longer. For World vs. World, which is the one I really don't play very much of, apparently it's very easy, and I have looked through on the wiki. It doesn't strike me as very difficult to get the World vs. World ring, but there is a kind of irritating 6-week time gate in which you have to get diamond chests and then just kind of sit around, that I don't know whether I'll still be excited about this whole thing in 6 weeks. I mean, we'll be in 2021 by then. So, hey. I will review, however, the visual effects. So, I'm kind of coming from a very purist place with Guild Wars 2, in which, once upon a time, the franchise was this. Legendaries were high prestige, high grind items that got you nothing. You didn't get a leg up, but they looked pretty. It was a game about grinding for cosmetics. So, when I hear a legendary amulet is in the game, I think to myself, well, that should look really good. The stat selectable side of it, which in truth has been my motivation here more than anything else, along with the armory, should be secondary to the visuals. But unfortunately, it looks like ArenaNet are operating on the reverse idea to that now. Both the ring from World vs. World and the amulet from PvP both have pretty unappetizing visuals. They're basically like a function gyro little orb that will float up next to your character. Now, I think these get a harder rap than they deserve. I think that the animations of the little orbs are actually pretty cool. If you guys have looked closely at the Icebreed Saga portals that the Icebreed charge out of, or when the Super Adventure Box update came out this year and a few other places, say the Renegade F3 ability where you fire all those missiles in, they have these cool animations where it's like a 2D image, but as you move the camera, you'll see it parallaxes and it looks very pretty. There's lots of moving layers. That's what these legendaries are. They're little orbs with these intricate, beautiful, like, environments on the inside that look like arenas filled with people fighting. As cool as that is, it's not as cool as the PvE legendaries that they gave us, the 2 accessories and the raiding ring. It's definitely not as cool as legendary weapons or legendary armor, which were controversial in their own right, and I think undeservedly so. And what's worst of all, one of these legendaries is a ring, the other one is an amulet. Now, that means that they're not the same to me. Yet, the devs gave them the same visuals. They're basically just a recolor. It's the ring will give you an orb over your right shoulder, and the amulet will give you an orb over your left shoulder. And they're recolors of each other. It's just very, very sloppy. It's not what legendaries are to me, and I think that's actually genuinely quite disappointing. Now, I've never been that hung up on the aesthetics in the game. I do enjoy that I have this orb here, but I enjoy it as like a status symbol. I enjoy it as proof to other people that I've got this thing cool and I've worked for this thing. I like what it represents, and the actual pretty factor of it doesn't matter much. But that said, I still feel this is sloppy, and I want to lend my voice to a chorus. I think that's been talking about this for a while, and I haven't really. The devs didn't do well with this. The day that a legendary amulet gets added to Guild Wars 2, it should have been something cool, and it wasn't. This all happened back in March, but I'm only just now interacting with it, so that's my little review there. The other side of this, though, is I do feel pretty cool on this now. Hopefully you've seen in the footage in the background, I gathered like all my legendaries onto this one character now. So like I've basically got every single slot in the game is legendary. That meant actually building the raiding ring up as well, which while I had done everything for it, I hadn't finished making the gift of desert mastery. This is actually the first gift of desert mastery that I've ever made. I had always used Maguma mastery instead, so it was kind of cool to go back to the POF era. You know, I was talking about making this Path of Fire review last week. Well, I've been playing a lot of the actual core Path of Fire maps and looking at that side of the legendary acquisition process because you're forced to do it for the raiding ring. Overall, it was pretty easy. It was fun to go back to some bounty trains. Hell, some of the metas I still think are really inspiring. Like, if you guys haven't played the WvW meta in the Forged base in a while, go back to that. Look at how cool the fight against the Hounds of Balthazar is there. I mean, the balance is obviously well off, but I'd forgotten so many amazing things about it. Imagine if it was a guild mission of the class like Triple Trouble or Tequassel, you know, like the hardcore guild mission idea. It would be so good, man. Well, there is one more thing that all of this got me on track for too. That's legendary runes and sigils, which I hadn't crafted either. These things are a little bit less expensive. They've got me looking at provisioners tokens and all of those updates too. Right now, I'm only just starting to craft the runes, and I don't have any of the sigils yet either, but the idea of having my character fully sorted out with the new build templates and all the slots unlocked, and I can just swap around all these things when the new expansion comes out, and I have these legendary runes, so I'll get access to all the new rune interactions too straight away, seems pretty fun. I don't think it's healthy for the game that veterans can eventually get to this level of power, but I've been bitten by the bug, and it's been something to do, which is quite nice. So that's really it, guys. That's current updates, my thoughts on the game as of the December 1st patch. Keep an eye on the channel. I've got plenty more to talk about. And again, if you've got anything even remotely interesting that you want to say down in the comments, please do, because I'd love to be able to make more episodes of The Floor, really, and really that comes down to you guys. If you're looking for even more Guild Wars 2 discussion, like-minded individuals, don't forget we have the in-game guild, and there's a link in the description to the Discord, where you don't need an account, you don't need anything really, just come join on over and have fun. I've been in there quite a lot lately. Need to get back to Twitter. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.